take a look at the metal lathe. Remember, before working on the metal lathe, you need to make sure that you've read the SOP and gone through all the safety procedures for working on this machine. The center lathe is a general purpose lathe. It can vary in size and complexity. We mostly use this for very basic operations, so what I will show you today will be the basics for operating this lathe. This lathe, like all other lathes, starts off with this front section here, which is your headstock. There is the bed, which is this flat table section, and there is your tailstock. The headstock, as you can see on this side, has a chuck attached to it. The more important is what's happening over here on this section. To set our speeds, we're going to use these two levers at the top. This first lever will point down to the lines below. At the moment it's pointing straight down, so it will be cutting either 82, 550 or 400 RPMs. This lever on this side tells us whether we're in A or B or C. Coming back to this graph over here, you'll notice you've got an A column, B column and C column. As we are in the center and on B, that gives us a speed of 550. Just below this is your feed screw setting. Now, I told you before, you can either cut going in or cut coming out. By rotating this, you are able to change your setting and cut on the way out. As you can see, the arrow shows, or as it's setting it the other way, cutting it on the way in. When you first switch on the lathe at the power point, this light over here should come on to let you know there's power. However, there are a number of switches on this machine. You have an emergency stop here. If that's in, it will not be lit up. There's an emergency switch over here. If that's in, that's not lit up. And at any time, should your guard be up, it has a switch that will switch the machine on and off. If that is closed, you will now see that that light is on. To operate the machine, if everything else is on and it's in neutral, if I press this green button, it will now switch the machine on. That means the machine is ready to operate. This next little one, that's your knob for emergencies. If something goes wrong, you press it in and it switches the whole machine off. You turn it out and it will switch the machine back on. Remember, before you can start machining, you'd have to put the drive on. This section over here is for pumping your soluble oil. If I switch it on, it will switch the pump on. This is our outlet for the soluble oil over here. If I have it switched on and I open this tap, you'll get soluble oil. This is a flexi arm, so it can be directed to where you are cutting. Soluble oil is used for keeping your work cool and helping to give you a smooth cut. Moving down our headstock, there are more settings at the bottom. You will not be requiring those for your basic operations. However, those settings are used for cutting different threads. The saddle comes up and over the bed. The front of the saddle is called the apron. On the front of the apron, we have a number of different hand wheels. This first hand wheel over here is the one that we use for the cross slide. It allows us to accurately turn on the cross slide by having measurements that we can set over here. This is both in millimeters and inches. So that will move this whole section backwards and forwards that way. On the front of the apron, we also have This hand wheel here, this is the apron hand wheel. This hand wheel will move the whole saddle across on the bed from left to right by winding this in or out. Now this can also happen automatically. By engaging this lead screw, it will feed the saddle according to which way you have it set on the gearing. Down here we have a feed. Now this feed is used for cutting threads. If I move it out and up, it will engage the feed screw and will slowly move the saddle going across. This again can be set as to be cutting threads to the left or cutting threads on the way back out to the right. Should I, however, have it set in and I actually push it down to engage it, okay, it now moves to cross cutting action. So it will now feed this hand wheel and will move the cross slide across at 90 degrees to the bed. This here is the compound slide. If I loosen this Allen key here and this with an Allen key over here, adjust it to any of the degrees I have here. Once I've adjusted it, I can wind this in over here and move the whole tool post. The tool post at the top is a section that will hold different cutting tools. It has these lugs on the top that hold the tool down on this bottom bed section. We also have this tool post clamp, which if I loosen it will allow me to rotate this head. This head rotates anti-clockwise, and if I move it forward that way it will only go to a position square to the rest of the bed. Make sure that once you have work in here that all your work is secure. This is our tailstock. It has a spindle hand wheel at the end here that moves the spindle in and out. We have our tailstock clamp, which helps us lock our tailstock in place so that it cannot move. This smaller lever over here is the one that locks our spindle in place when we are working. Now our tools that fit into here. Here we have a revolving center and we're going to fit it into the spindle on the tailstock. I push that in quite firmly and it will not just come out again. It is held in place by a taper. When we're moving the spindle in and out, we have two places we can check on the mounts coming out. 0, 10, 20, 30 will be your millimeter readings on the machine. Should I then go to the back, there is this little collar over here, and as I turn the handle you will see that will turn as well, and I can see how many millimeters I have advanced the spindle. So that is your tailstock. Now on our headstock we have a 3-jaw chuck. What's nice about a 3-jaw chuck is that each of these jaws move together. I use my chuck key. Please note it's got a spring on it. A spring is on it so that you cannot leave it in the top of the chuck. As soon as you let it go, the spring will push it out. So if I move that, you will notice that all 3 jaws move simultaneously. I can hold something in the center like a rod, or I can open this out inside something. Now I can always change these jaws around and go to something like this jaw, which is made to clamp down onto something, so that would then fit on the inside. Here we have the 4-jaw chuck. The difference between a 3-jaw and a 4-jaw chuck is that on a 3-jaw chuck all 3 jaws move together. On a 4-jaw chuck I can change each one of these independently. So on the side, it has a section for the key to go into, and I can move this one in and out independently of the others. This is good when you're working with odd shapes, or you wish to cut a hole that is off center in your material. Over here we have a faceplate. A faceplate has little sections that come through and hold your work, and as a result you can clamp a piece of work anywhere on here to turn a hole in the center section. So the hole you're actually turning could be right on the side of your article. This here is called a steady. What it does, it fits onto your lathe bed and it will come down, and this can get locked on here. These 3 pins are set up to run against your material, so while it's rotating inside here, these pins will stop it from vibrating. This is handy for if you have long pieces of metal that you're turning and you do not wish them to vibrate up and down or move around. Now there are numerous tools that we can fit to use on the lathe. This is a basic set of tools that we normally use. We've got this cutter over here, cutting to the right, cutter, left cutter, and this borer which fits inside. So this one we use for cutting holes inside. These here we will use for cutting across. You'll see the little gold section at the front. That's called an insert. If you wish to remove that or change it, each insert can be used 3 times. And if we use this little tool here, we can loosen the screw in the center. Be aware that that's a very small screw and it's quite easy to drop it on the floor and lose it. In this little case we have some spare inserts. This next tool over here is one that will fit into the same setting as what we are using, and it's a parting tool. It has a very thin blade. There's the blade. It is wider at the top and narrow at the bottom, and this is used for when you're cutting straight into your material to cut it off. This tool over here is used for knurling. You'll notice it has a pattern on the front. That's what puts your grip onto the stake turner. So this is our tool post that's going to hold all our different tools. I said before, you can loosen it and you can rotate it around. If I put the tool flat onto the bottom of this here, it's going to be too low. You're going to have to use little flat plates of steel like these here to put underneath it to raise it. These flat bars of steel we'll call shims. So I'll put these shims in there. I can put my tool on top of that, fit that in, push it all the way against the bar. This is my key. I'll take it and I'll just put light pressure down on each of those. Now once I've tightened that, I'm going to take a look at how to center it. There are 2 ways. I can use the chuck or I can use the center. The center is normally the quickest. I move this forward, clamp down my tailstock. I can move my spindle forward and I can come across with my cross slide and get my point to meet up with the point of the spindle. That is one thin plate away, so I need to put it a little higher. Right, I've added one more shim. Just going to tighten up all the lugs. And move that forward again. That's lovely. It's a nice point to point, and that is my correct height for turning. Once I've turned my work and I want to drill a hole, I'm going to use one of these centering bits. The centering bit has a little tip on it. It is short and it stops it moving around when you start to drill. You only need to make a small hole when you start drilling, and that will set up your hole for using a standard drill bit. Today we're going to turn a handle for our stake turner. So this is our basic stake turner. A sharp point up this end for turning the stakes, and you are making your handle. We're going to turn this side mostly first, and this will be our last section that you're going to cut off. So starting off, we've got our blank 200 millimeters long, and we're going to put that into our 3-jaw chuck. Now because it's a 3-jaw chuck, they'll all tighten together and they will all be nice and even. Here's our chuck key with its spring on it. We tighten this up nice and tight, and to operate this we will need to close our guard. I'm now going to move my tool post closer using my apron hand wheel. And our first process is to clean the front. To clean the front off here, I'm going to use a process called facing off. I'm going to loosen my tool post and just to change it a little, and I can come along so that I'm able to just skim off the front. I'm going to move my tailstock right away so it's not going to affect what I'm doing here. Now because this is aluminium, remember we said we use cutting oil out of here. That's for steel. For aluminium we're going to use kerosene. So we take our tin of kerosene. I normally place it at the back here. I'll clean off my tool and I'm ready to cut. I check my speed. I want to turn at 550. At 550, I've got that set down the center, and that's on B. That's going to give me my 550. My machine's on. Light that up. I now have power. Now to make the lathe move, I want this to be turning this way into my cut. Over here, I'm going to move this out and down. Remember, we're going this way, so I'm moving the handle down. If I move the handle out and up, it's going to rotate that way. So it's out and down. Right, I'm going to slowly feed this across. I've got a fairly clean cut on that, but I still got some saw marks on it. So I'm going to repeat that process until I have a nice clean front. So you can see I've got a nice smooth face here. If you go too fast, this will be fairly rough, so you really do want to go slowly. And right in the center is a tiny as little mark. That means my settings for the height of my cutter is fine. If you're left with quite a large piece, or the tool's trying to go funny when it gets to the center, it means that the height of your tool is not correctly set. You're going to need to reset the height according to your center. The next exercise is to round this front corner off. I'm going to put this back round to the front, lock it down, and now I've got to do two things. I'm going to move this in on the cross slide. I'm going to move it out with the apron hand wheel. Good. There's two steps finished. You faced it off. You've rounded this off. The next step is smoothing that out. You can keep going by trying to cut it smoother. Once you've got your basic shape, it's easier just to file it. So I'm going to move my tool post out of the way, and I'm going to file this. I'm going to use a hand file, a flat hand file. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to be filing here while it's turning. You You can keep a hand on the front and at the back. And as you're filing forward, you're just going to roll it over. Make sure the front of your file is clean. Put some kerosene on it. Use your file card to clean it. Make sure there's no pinning, because if you get pinning on it, it will tear the aluminium while you're cleaning it. So that process is actually known as lathe filing. Remember, you got normal cross filing, you got draw filing when you draw the file across your work, and the third process is lathe filing. That's lathe filing. Once you have it nice and smooth, your next step would be to sandpaper that down. To drill my hole, I'm going to use a centering bit first, and then I'm going to use my 3.5mm drill bit. If I started with this, it would walk around at the front and not give me a good start. By using one of these first, I'm able to get an accurate center, and I can start drilling after that. I move the drill bit just up to a little way away. I lock my tailstock down, and I'm going to use my spindle handle to advance the spindle to drill that hole. I'm still working at the same speed. I drill that on. I now have a hole in the center of the work. I can remove that, put in my drill bit. Now the hole I want to drill is going to be 20mm deep. I'm going to move my drill bit till it is just touching on my work. And over here, I've got my spindle set at 20mm. If I take my 20 plus the 20 I want for my hole, that goes to 40. So I'm going to drill this till it says 40. I need to make sure I continue to put kerosene on the drill bit. I drill a little, come out, clean the drill bit, go again, come back, clean the drill bit. So let's do that. I've now drilled a 20mm hole, and I can clear this all away because that's the end of those processes. Our next process is going to be to take this out and knurl it. I also need to remove this chuck and put in a revolving center. I've now taken my work out further, and I'm just holding it on the last 20 to 30mm. I have a revolving center on. I have this locked down tight. I've wound this up so that it's firm, and I lock off my spindle. I have fitted the knurling tool into the tool post, and I'm going to move it against my work about 20 mils from the end. I move it on, and I just put a light amount of pressure on it. At this stage I can put Kero on everything. However, once you start turning, do not put the brush here, as it will be pulled in and you'll mess up not only my tool, your work as well. The first thing I'm going to do is run it for a short while just to see what the pattern is that I get. I need to get a pattern that has a nice pyramid shape to it. Now we see, if we have a look at this, it is running a little more on the left than on the right. By using the compound slide and winding it back a bit, I can square that head off. I will have to tighten this a little on the cross slide, and I'm going to run it again to see what it does. Right, I've run it a little more and put some more pressure on it. If I look, I'm getting nice little pyramids on there. That's what I'm wanting. And now what I can do, if I moved it over by hand on the apron hand wheel, I will get little bars along it as I move it. So we want it to move along nice and smoothly. So for this, we're going to use the feed. We have to move it out and up. I'm going to turn the knurling to approximately here. If I stop and leave it to run, it will cut another little bar in it. So the quickest would be to use this here. This is your emergency stop brake. It stops your work dead. Normally, if you use any other stop, it slows down slowly. So I'm actually going to use that to stop it when I get to my desired length. Before you go, make sure there's kerosene on everything. Remember, from now on, only drop it on, because you put the brush down there, it will be damaged. Go start. Go start. Out. And up. So this is all feeding now. When you have it in feed mode, make sure that you're watching it all the time. Good, I've now stopped it. And if you have a look at that, it's a beautiful pattern. The knurling is nice and even, and you have neat little pyramids on each one. If it was not correct, you could go back and cut across it again by changing your feed. But once you move this tool away from your work, you cannot come back onto your knurling again. You'll never ever pick up that pattern, and all you'll do is mash up what you have here. When you are happy with that, then you can use the cross slide, wind it away again, and you have completed what you need to do on the lathe. All that's left for you to do is to sandpaper from that edge down and this back section here, and you will eventually cut it. To keep your knurling nice and clean, put some masking tape around it while you are sandpapering and polishing it. Your next step would be, once you've done that and it's sanded and polished, would be to cut your threads. Now I'm going to sandpaper this end here and that little piece across there. I'm going to put the speed right up to about 1100. To do that, I have to do the following. There's 1100. That has to be down across one. I put it across, that's on B. Now if you put it across and you find it does not want to engage, rotate the head a little and it will engage properly. If you happen to switch the lathe back on and it either doesn't run or makes a little gritting sound, then check that you have your gears in gear properly. Good, I'm going to run at 1100 now, and I'm going to sandpaper that end. Good, I've just been over it with paper. There's still a few nicks in it, so I'll have to stay with this is 360 paper till I can get those nicks out. The back's looking nice and smooth. And then after this I'm going to continue with a 600. Here's our finished product. From here you're going to take it out the lathe. You're going to polish off the ends and this end down here, and you will also be cutting this back piece at an angle. Do it carefully, follow the safety rules, work safely.